Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, March 23rd meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, I will take a roll call of the committee attendance. Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Mr. Alfred.
Present.
Ms. Nersessian.
Here.
Mr. Whitaker.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
And of course, I am here, so thank you. And before we begin, I just wanted to update the committee and the public on some agenda changes we've made since we posted the original agenda. They've been posted, but I just want to, we had originally scheduled as you know, we had scheduled the Keefe Tech school budget review tonight, followed by the Holliston Public Schools school budget review. They were not quite ready yet, so we talked to them and we agreed that it would be better to postpone until they were fully prepared. So we'll be meeting with them next week. So if anybody is watching or joining us to hear the Holliston Public Schools budget discussion tonight, that will be taking place next week on the 30th. Also, I had told the committee we would try to meet with the stipend committee tonight, but after discussing with our town clerk about the late notice, we decided it would be best if we just kept that on March 30th to avoid any potential issues about last minute notice. So what that means is that for tonight, we're going to have Keefe, and then we're going to have the regular updates, days and updates, things like that. And then we'll have the executive session tonight to talk to the school committee. And then next week, we'll have the stipend committee and the school department presentation. As for minutes, as I told you all, we're a couple of weeks behind. I will catch up on those this week because I had an unexpected emergency last week. Not really, nothing critical. Everything's fine, but it took time away that I was going to use to do the minutes. So catch up on all that. So that's the plan for tonight. So now let's just dive right in. And I see Superintendent Evans and Dottie on the Zoom. So Dottie, you can take over if you're going to do the presentation. Just make sure to unmute. and I should say, for those, you introduce yourselves for those who might be watching at home that haven't seen you before.
Hey, thank you very much. My name is John Evans. I'm the superintendent of Keefe Tech, and accompanying me is Dolly Sharrock, the director of finance and business operations, who will be helping with this presentation. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about some of the updates for Keefe Tech and to provide you with information regarding our budget process, our status, and the assessment request for the town of Holliston. So Dolly, if you can put that on screen, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much. So to begin, I would like to tell the town of Holliston to remind you that you're very well represented by two members on our school committee, and they are Sarah Comerford, who is here with us this evening on screen and showing her support, which we appreciate, and also Barry Sims, who is another long-serving member from the town of Holliston. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the support of Dr. Susan Kuska, who I believe is also on this call, and the staff from Holliston Public Schools for their support in providing information to families who are considering career and technical education for a high school option, and for families who want to learn more about Keefe Tech. To be able to access those students and help them make the right decision is very much appreciated. Holliston has a fantastic school district, and within that school district are some students who could be well served by career and technical education. So we appreciate the opportunity to work with those potential students and the ones who chose to be with us. So to provide you with an update on our budget development process, we have followed, though virtual in our process, we followed our process that we have in many years before, where we had 3 open meetings of our budget subcommittee, where we had each and every line of our budget reviewed and presented by the manager who stands in front of that cost area. We explained any rationale for increases or any changes in those amounts. That process culminated in January with a vote by our school committee on a preliminary budget that had an increase of 4.95%. And that is where we leave off in January as we await word from the State House and some better information regarding Chapter 70, and after getting an opportunity to show some efficiencies within our budget. So we went through that process between January and March, and that culminated in a public hearing of our budget in the beginning of March. And at that time, we had a unanimous vote of our committee for a final operating budget, which was for $21,909,422. And that's an increase of 3.68% over FY21. So we were able to trim more than a full percent off the original 4.9% preliminary budget. So in terms of the areas of our budget that I'd like to highlight for you, we have, in an effort to be transparent, identified areas where line items increased in excess of $25,000, and we wanted to review with you what those are. And those include our health and dental insurance, where there was an increase in our premium. We had a fairly competitive rate this year. We came in under 10% at around the 8 to 8.5% range. So we're pleased with the advocacy of our broker and utilization. And overall, we continue to do very well in our transition to the high deductible model that we shifted to several years ago. In transportation, we have a third year of our contract that had an increase of $48,125. We continue to be pleased with that service, and we have some extension options on that contract. For asset acquisition, we have a Siemens Energy contract where we've upgraded the infrastructure of our district some time ago, and we have 2 years remaining on our lease. The increase this year was $29,326. In full transparency, we wanted to let you know that we do have 4 positions built into this budget that are new positions. These are in the 3 academic areas that pertain to MCAS, and also where our freshmen have these classes both weeks instead of the alternating week schedule in language arts, math, and science. We have enjoyed an increase in enrollment at Keefe Tech, and some of our academic classes have moved up into the mid to high 20s. We continue to serve about 43% of our students who receive special education supports, and we needed to take some steps to bring down that ratio a little bit. And by adding to those 3 departments, we should be able to do so. In addition, we have requested an increase in our carpentry department for a 3rd instructor. With consistently high enrollment in that area, we have the ability now to go out on a house building project and also supervise students on site to ensure their safety while we're working with them. Within our budget, we're in our 3rd year of our collective bargaining agreement, and there is a 2.25% COLA for our staff, and that amount is indicated as well. So when you look at those 5 line items within our budget and total them, you will see that there's an increase of $949,733. And I would ask that you contrast that with the overall budget increase for FY22, which is $778,422. So we hope that demonstrates to you that we are prudent in other areas of our budget and transparent in the areas where we believe that increases are needed to serve our students. I'd like to spend just a little bit of time reviewing our revenue, and I don't want to get overly detailed, but if you'll permit me, I would like to share our situation with Chapter 70. So when we met with you, I think specifically it was the day before we closed, was the evening of the Holliston Finance Committee meeting that we attended, and then the world kind of stopped spinning after that point.
It's all our fault? Is that what you're trying to tell us, John?
What's that?
So you're trying to tell us it was all our fault?
Absolutely not. Would not be a good idea. No, I'm not. We were at that time painting a very rosy picture and believing that we would receive a significant increase in Chapter 70 funding. So at that time, what we projected for last year's Chapter 70 was $6,499,717. That was with Student Opportunity Act money built in, increase in enrollment. And what we said to you and what held true is if there was any change in the Chapter 70 number after we locked the assessment in the budget, that we did not have any intention going back to our member communities for any other funding, and that we would make do with what we got. It turned out that there was a shortfall in that amount by $302,692, and we were able to address that issue from within our budget. Unfortunately, there were areas of surplus that resulted from having a closed building. Our consumables were not consumed. We weren't paying bus drivers, coaches, et cetera. So we were able to absorb that amount. The Chapter 70 projection for FY22 is $6,509,850. That is actually a pretty significant increase in Chapter 70, but it appears to be only $10,000 based on the way the assessments are built because of last year's Chapter 70 being inflated. And the result of the Chapter 70 being inflated last year meant that the assessment that we provided you with was based on a higher Chapter 70 number than actually came to be. So in fact, the assessment last year could have been higher. Obviously, that would have had to be been explained and approved by you. But had we had the accurate information for Chapter 70 last year, the assessment last year would have been $22,944 more than what we requested. And therefore, the increase between last year and this year would be a little bit less. As always, we have applied some of our revenue as offsets for all of our member communities. These include investment income. We're applying, once again, $250,000 of excess and deficiency directly to offset assessments from our member communities, as we've done before. And we also apply all of the money from our 4 non-resident tuitions and our Medicaid funding directly to offset the assessment of our member communities. That amount totals $368,600. So a couple of summary slides for you. We continue to grow in terms of our enrollment at Keefe Tech. We are up to 812 students from our 5 member municipalities. With 5 non-resident students, that's up to 817. That is an increase of 17 students, or 2.1%. I'm pleased to tell you that we are approaching the capacity of our district, whereas last year we had a freshman class of 225. This year, we actually have a record number of applicants for next year's class. And we are approaching actual full utilization of our building, which I think is great news in terms of our communities having access to career and technical education. For Holliston, there was an increase this year. We had 60 students last year. We're up to 68 students this year. And this is an increase of 8 students, or 13.3%. And as I point out, with pluses and minuses, when you have a relatively small amount of students to start with, a single-digit shift can really result in a large percentage change. So this year was 8 more students, or an increase of 13.3% in enrollment. In terms of the Holliston assessment, this year we have a request of $1,421,995. And that's an increase of $207,638, or 17.1%. So in terms of looking at the change in enrollment and the change in assessment, you have 13.3 and 17.1. And just a couple of considerations for you. The amount of Chapter 70 that I explained in the shortfall of FY21, had the $22,944 been accurately applied to last year's assessment, the increase this year would have been 14.94%. Same dollar value, but it would have reflected a smaller percentage increase. And this year also, there's the potential of $54,621 in ESSER funding, and the state has still yet to clearly communicate with us, but we believe there should be and could be a benefit to the town of Holliston for their affiliation with Keefe Tech, and those funds would be able to be reduced right out of the assessment for the town. If that consideration for the FY21 shortfall is applied and the $54,000 ESSER money is applied to offset the assessment, you would find that in fact the percentage increase would be less than the 13.3%. But back to the transparent value that we're requesting, it is $1,421,995, which is an increase of $207,638. And with that, I would be pleased to answer any questions you have about either this presentation or anything to do with Keefe Tech.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay, I see hands going up. So we'll start with Mr. Whitaker, I believe, was first. So, yeah, Mark.
Thank you for entertaining the questions. I appreciate your presentation here. The ESSER funding, does that apply to just Holliston, or would that be spread across all parts of
that? That amount would apply directly to Holliston. There are 3 communities where there was an increase in minimum contribution, and those for us are Framingham, Ashland, and Holliston. And Holliston's specific amount for that ESSER funding is $54,612. Ashland and Framingham have their own figures that could be applied as well.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, what's up, Mark? Okay, I think Vin was next. So, Mr. Murphy, go ahead.
Yeah. First, thank you. Your presentations are very good and very detailed, so I appreciate that. Question, why is regional transportation expected to go down the Chapter 71? Or did you over-best budget last year?
It was more we underutilized last year with the pandemic. It's based on the amount that's spent and what the reimbursement is. So unfortunately, when we stopped running buses in May and didn't run them again until January, it had an impact on the ability to get reimbursement and funding.
What does ESSER stand for, as for the ESSER funding?
This is exactly why I brought Dolly with me. So perhaps, yeah.
It's the new stimulus bill, Vin.
Okay.
It is that. I don't know what the acronym is, but that is what the funding is.
And the last thing I have a question is investment income. Where are you getting investments? So you have money sitting in a bank? And
Pretty much, yeah. When we get funding from the towns, there's a little bit of interest earned as we get
you're earning interest?
from communities. What's that?
You're earning interest on the bank accounts I manage. We're not earning anything, so.
A little bit.
Okay.
Okay, and I think Michelle was next.
I have a couple of questions. The first is, the Holliston schools are asking for positions for social and emotional learning. Do you have any positions for that?
We have a number of positions built into our budget. My background is guidance. That's where I started in Keefe Tech 25 years ago. And I believe we do a really nice job in having supports available for our students. This year, we are hiring a school psychologist, but that is going to be a neutral number of staff positions because we are going without a contract service provider and kind of switching the funding there. But we currently have 4 guidance counselors based on an increase that took place last year. We have a social worker, 2 school psychologists, interns, and access to contract service providers. So I do believe our students are pretty well served in that regard, and it's a great team.
Okay, so you haven't found any issues. I don't know what your schedule was like. Were students in classrooms, or what was happening last year? Because we haven't talked to you for a year.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? What was happening last year?
What was happening with the students? We haven't talked to you for a year. So were they remote? Were they
Sure.
in labs or in shop or?
So we pivoted, like all schools in Massachusetts, to a remote model. That was particularly challenging for us with our hands-on approach to learning and career and technical education. Our staff did a really nice job, but it's great to have the kids back with us now because there is no replacing in-person instruction. So last year it was all remote teaching. When we began this year, we had every intention of starting in a hybrid model, but being in Framingham, when Framingham became a red community just before the start of the year, we were advised to stay remote. So we had a slower start in getting students back into the building. We are going to be transitioning from a hybrid program that focuses just on the career and tech or the shop instruction on April 5th to a more robust hybrid program where we're going to have students in person for academics as well. So our counselors during that time and our special educators did a lot of outreach to families, had a lot of meetings, but it was remote. And we currently still have a lot of supports that are remote and now in person with the students back with us again.
Okay, and then my last question, I know you've discussed this in detail with us before, but could you discuss your health insurance again? I know you mentioned the high deductible, but I know you have like an HSA that offsets it, right?
We do. So we transitioned to a high deductible plan that is $2,500 for individuals, $5,000 for families. And we had such significant savings by transitioning into that plan that the district invests a portion of the HSA into the HSA to offset the deductible for our employees. And that amount is 50%. And we continue to be way ahead of the game. Overall, we've had I think overall, Dolly, in the last 5 years, we've had an average of about 4% increase. We've had as high as 9%, as low as 0 level funded health insurance after the original switch to that model. So we believe it was pretty aggressive and it was an adjustment, but we're pleased with where we're at this time in terms of costs.
So what happened when you left you were in West Suburban, right?
We were.
Did you have to leave the money there? I don't know what it's called, the pool of money that's there to offset increases. You know, they have us contribute money, so it kind of levels things out. Did that money just stay there and you left with nothing?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that question. I could follow up with you, but I know that we were counseled by our broker to give an early enough notification that we were not in any sort of a penalty in terms of our discontinuation with that model. And I know that ultimately we had insurance costs that went down by about 8 or 9% when we were otherwise facing a double-digit increase. So it was a really significant swing in costs when we made that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Nersessian, I think you were next, and then Dan.
Okay, thanks. Could you talk a little bit about the end of last fiscal year as you transitioned out to more of a remote learning? And then I think you said you were remote until January and then went hybrid. I could have gotten the dates wrong, but were there cost savings around that because the school wasn't open, utilities weren't being run, or at least to the extent they would have? Any contractors that you didn't have to continue to keep on?
Sure, I'd be happy to explain.
Yeah.
There were some unanticipated increases. There were also some areas of surplus that resulted. As I told my committee when I asked for a vote on the budget, this year that we're in looks nothing like the year that we started planning in November of 2019 with them when we mapped out a budget. So we've had a lot of shifts and transfers. The need to fund PPE, the need to increase the rigor of our cleaning process, supplies, protocols, et cetera, have been an increase in cost. But unfortunately, we did not pay our coaches for the fall and winter seasons that we were not able to have. We have some savings in transportation where we weren't running buses. We also had significant savings in our substitute teaching budget. And those are the areas that we use to offset some of those additional costs in PPE. In addition, looking at the balance of this year, quite frankly, in some of our career and technical programs, we did not use the supplies that we needed for the full year. So we're investing some of our funding for this year to make that supply whole again. And we were able to back some money out of the FY22 budget that we won't need once we are able to fully replenish our supplies this year. So it's been a lot of moving parts.
With the PPE and any of those other costs, aren't those covered by the CARES?
Yep, a significant amount was, but we have a contract service provider for cleaning, and we really did intensify that. So there are also some additional costs there, but we did well with CARES Act money and did apply those funds for both cleaning and some of our student needs as well.
And do you happen to have a breakdown of where like the end of last year ended up and same? And what did you do for the end of the last year? Because some schools went fully remote, just sort of, and struggled with some of it long, some time out. Was that similar, or did you guys pop up sort of end on Friday, start on Monday?
No, we last year we shifted to fully remote model and needed to stay there per order of the governor. One of the things that we needed to implement for our students, not expecting to be in this circumstance, there were some significant technology needs for our students that were not being addressed. And we were actually able to pivot to a one-to-one Chromebook initiative. And we did that by emptying out the laptop carts that we had in the building. We had a number of different 20 to 25 unit carts that were shared by departments. We started by getting those out to students, and we used some funding through grants to be able to provide more Chromebook options, to be able to get computers out to students. Some of our students needed broadband or Wi-Fi access that they didn't have at home as well. So that was a real challenge and an unanticipated move that we needed to make, but I think our students and our staff did well with that transition.
And were those covered under CARES as well?
I'm going to ask Dolly for the CARES Act funding for that. Was that all surplus or CARES Act? What's the combination, Dolly?
So the remote piece of this for hotspots, that was done through CARES Act money.
And then any additional Chromebooks as well?
Yes.
Okay. Is there maybe a breakdown of how you ended last year and then sort of how you've addressed this current year? That might be helpful in terms of the deltas of what you were expecting, what was a result of COVID versus not. I think that would be helpful, just given the increase going into next year is pretty significant. It would be good just to see how last year ended up and then this year is ending up where we are now.
Sure, we could provide that to you.
Okay, thank you. That was it, Ken. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Alford?
Sure. So back on the page where the greater than $25,000 items, I don't know if you just want to bring that one up.
Sure.
Obviously, that total is greater than the total budget increase. So I'm curious, maybe I missed it, but what went down?
So looking through the budget, there are about 12, 14 pages of items, and some of them went down by small amounts. Some of our supply budgets were decreased, and there were just a number of areas that were lower. In terms of the significant ones, Dolly, do any come to mind?
No, I would say it's mostly supplies that we were able to purchase in advance and remove from the FY22 budget. It was a lot of the smaller accounts that we were able to just trim a little bit from each one.
Okay, so the budget increase is not net of the sort of the favorability or the release of reserves?
No, it is not based on the reserves are going exclusively to the member communities. We need a vote of our school committee and our member towns to use our reserve funds for any budgeted purposes. So we have a vote from our school committee to be able to use the $250,000 to offset assessments. We did not use any other reserve funding, but we're able to benefit from grants.
Okay, so the release of reserves is not built into your budget in any way. That's sort of a okay. But what I'm trying to it's a little complicated. I'm trying to calculate what your sort of open door number is, right? Your run rate number, excluding adds to staff, if you will, basically, and excluding all of your retirement and health insurance. Because what I'm trying to get apples to apples to where the Holliston schools are. So, and I guess what I've come up with is if you take the 778,000, you take out the 337 and the 240, you're left with something close to almost 250 or something like that, thousand, something like that, and for about a 1%. Increase is that am I thinking about that right?
I mean, that is accurate. I think that it's fair to say that very few schools would be level funded for the insurance, and just about everyone has a salary increase at that point. So yes, that would be true that it'd be 1% without those items, but those items typically exist, especially the salary and school budget.
Sure, but sure. No, because the salaries are in there. The salaries are basically the driving factor of the entire increase once you take everything out. Yeah. And I want the health insurance out because in Holliston anyway, that's not in the school department budget. That's in the town budget. So that's not in the request. So if I'm trying to compare sort of the requests by different and trying to make the requests look or equivalent, it's 1%. And then when you go and you add on the 240,000 for the additional teachers, your sort of total budget request, excluding health insurance, is about double. Is about 2% or so. And so so again, because you said the reserves. Can we just go back to that page though where you discussed the 368,000?
Sure.
Okay, so that 368 is what you're planning on voting to return to the town as sort of a reduction, potentially a reduction in our appropriation or our allocation.
Yeah, it gets to the bottom line that we're requesting, but that is part of how that assessment came to be. There's a reduction to get to that.
I mean, it's important, and this is not really, it's just important that our budget is going, our allocation before this is going up by 17%. But almost all of that, 15% of that, is because we sent 8 more students to your district from our town. It's not because your budget is going up by 17%. I mean, that's what that's where I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, that is absolutely the case. It's 3.68, and we do have an analysis. I don't know how detailed you want us to get, but we would be prepared to also show you. We do have a slide of all of our municipal costs that exist within our budget that certainly the town of Holliston pays for, but it would not be on the school side of the budget. And that's sort of how we distinguish ourselves with less of an apples to apples measure, because we're paying for health insurance, some other building related costs that would be on the town side of most school departments.
You mean like snow removal, stuff like that? Is that kind of where you're getting at?
We pay for our snow removal.
Right.
And actually Dolly could maybe open that document for us just to show you.
Can you see it or no?
I can see your.
You can see your directory, not the file.
Okay.
How about now?
Yep.
Okay.
So these are the items that are in our budget that would not be typically in a school budget, and that totals about 19% of our budget.
Okay, but I guess I'm not. The percentage isn't as important to me as the increase, I guess, just because if you're looking at sort of year over year changes, right, where it is, and so and it looks like so the increase from this year is about, what is it, $230,000.
Yep.
So about 4%.
230,000 would be a little over 1% of our overall budget. But in terms of that increase, yes.
Yeah. Okay, is this something that you sent us?
That's something we didn't know if you need it. We'd be happy to send it directly to Chairman Saja.
Sure, okay.
He would have it as well.
That'd be great. Okay, so unemployment, Medicaid, yep, those are all handled by our town side, all of that. And that's built into that insurance number 2 at the top of your budget, right?
We have health insurance as a line item as well for both active and retirees as one of those items.
Yep. Are you currently funding your OPEB at any level?
We are. What we've done is we took an approach where if there's an amount in the spring in surplus that we could put into OPEB, we've done that, and we currently have about $450, Dolly?
Yes.
About $450,000 invested in OPEB over about 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. So we are, quite frankly, nowhere near as aggressive as Holliston has been or as proficient in funding the OPEB, but we have made steps in that direction. We have not put it in as a part of our budget. If we put in a $200,000 line item for OPEB, the concern would be, one, that would be asking our member communities to fund it up front. And secondly, we would be committing those funds prior to knowing the needs of our students. So instead, our committee has opted to looking at when we can address OPEB and contributing in the spring when that's a possibility.
Sure. And so far be it from me to turn away, refunds from you, to reduce our contribution for this year. But why is the thought then to take that extra, the $368,000 and return it to the member towns rather than to invest it in OPEB?
That's been the decision of the committee, and I would defer to them. Historically, we've wanted to provide our communities with a more palatable assessment number. Excess and deficiency has been pretty healthy for our district, so we believe that we could take a portion of our reserve fund and apply it to assessments and still have enough on hand should there be an emergency that we needed to address beyond the footprint of our budget. And it really has been an attempt to look at it through surplus, understanding that it's a difficult year and a difficult time for many of our communities. So we did not take it upon ourselves to proactively invest a significant amount, but instead look at reserve once we know we've met the needs of our students and provided offsets to those who fund us.
Sure. Yeah, it's actually it's the kind of thing, but it's kind of a weird thing, right? Because individual members of the Keefe Tech sort of collaborative, I don't know if it's officially collaborative anyway, move up and down in their percentages every year based upon different numbers of students, and you're funding something 30 years out for retiree, for retirees. It's kind of a weird kind of prioritization. I mean, it's you could in theory have a huge population now and end up paying for a lot of that if you did it up front. And then by the time that the payments are made and those people retire, or those people are receiving health insurance in retirement, maybe your contribution has dwindled or something like that. So.
And also the approach for our municipalities differs as well. Some are less aggressive. So for us to build in a significant budget item might not be well received by a town that's not approaching it in the same manner.
Yeah, I would suggest that you start to build in something. Maybe it's not 200,000, but at least just start chipping away at it, right? Because the last thing you want to also do is have to come back because of some change in some unfunded mandate by the state, where you have to actually start really funding it, and it's not 200,000, it's 500,000.
Yeah, I understand.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Sue, I see your hands up again.
Yeah, I was just wondering, on this spreadsheet, it looks like dental insurance is going up, went from like 3% to 5% this the FY22. Can you was there something that's driving that?
I thought we had a pretty good, I think we had a 3% increase, and I think it could be a function of additional staff participating in the plan. But we actually had a very competitive rate and a long-term locked rate with our dental program. So we've been pretty fortunate in that regard.
Okay. And then is the increase in the retiree health insurance due to rate increases or increases in people retiring?
Retirees, people retiring.
People retiring.
Yes.
Do you have I guess what's the outlook? Do you have a lot of people who are coming close to retirement age, or?
I would say that in my time at Keefe Tech, a lot of folks have retired. I think now even looking at some of the retirement incentives that's being advocated for by some of the unions, there aren't as many people who would be participating in it, and it anecdotally feels like we have a lot of new younger teachers at this time.
Okay.
You can put numbers to a page on that, of course.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I just had a couple of questions if nobody else on the committee has any questions. The first one is, when you referred to the ESSER funding, just for clarification, you're talking about ESSER 2, not ESSER 1, right? Which is the funding from the most recent stimulus bill, okay? So is the plan for that really going to be just basically apply that money towards assessment reduction, or are there other planned uses for the money?
There has not been clear direction from the state, which has been frustrating to us as well at this point. But it's our understanding that this funding would be coming into the district, and that municipalities, the 3 of our 5 who have access to ESSER funding, would have the option of either leaving the money with the district, understanding that it would be applied to meet the needs of the district, or directly offsetting the assessment for those member communities. I think since there's 3 out of 5, it would be my anticipation in conversations that if allowed, municipalities would apply those funds to offset the assessment. And I would think with Holliston, with a significant increase, that might be something you would choose to do. What's frustrating is that it's not clear to us whether that is exactly how it will play out. We keep asking and we don't have an answer yet.
Okay, yeah, no, I recognize that a lot of that is still not clear. We're dealing with that on our end too with the second stimulus, this latest stimulus package. But I was just wondering if that was the plan, but that's good. The other thing was, just as a follow-up to Dan's question about the liability funding, do you happen to know what the funded percentage is right now of your OPEB liability? Where are you? You said you put away $450,000. What was the actual last valued liability? I'm not expecting it to be a lot. I know you said you haven't made much progress, but I'm just wondering.
It was about 26 million. So we are
okay.
Not too far into it.
So, but to Dan's point, I would say, and obviously this is something that can be discussed with our school committee, Keefe school committee members and things, but it is something Dan raises a very valid point of, at some point, the bill is going to come due, and out of equity to the member towns, it definitely wouldn't be the right thing to do to just turn around and say, okay, now we're going to smack, everybody with a big assessment based on their today enrollment, where, I mean, look at Holliston, for example, and I'm not saying this just for Holliston's sake, but, Holliston's enrollment has been slowly creeping up over the last decade or two, right? So if we get to an enrollment of 70 or 100 kids, and then you suddenly say, okay, now you got to pay a huge portion of this OPEB liability when we had 20 kids in the district for 20 years, right? I mean, there is some value in going to the member towns and saying, you don't have to be aggressive, crazy about it, but there is some value in saying to the member towns, we want to start building some of this in, because this way the assessment reflects that the 30-year payment period, so to speak, reflects the enrollment over 30 years, not the enrollment at the end of 30 years when the bill comes due. So
that's an excellent point. And to be honest, Ken, we have not really viewed it through the vantage point of a district with fluctuating enrollment, what the liability would be. So that's an excellent point. We do have a meeting of the OPEB Trust coming up before our April meeting, and we're going to be reviewing our strategy and in the development of next year's budget beyond hopefully making a surplus entry this year. That certainly should be a consideration for our committee to be a little more proactive about it.
Yeah, well, either be more proactive or, and I don't know if this is possible given the documents that make up the district, but or formulate a plan for how you're going to calculate the assessment later on, right? That does something where you take the time history of enrollment to do that and say, okay, we're going to use a formula-based approach where you look at enrollment over the last 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. I think that if you came up with something like that, well, obviously from our perspective, we prefer you get on the funding. We understand that, there are 4 other districts and they may feel differently, but when the time comes to pay the bill, I think it helps to think about that now, about how would we properly make an assessment for that component that accounts for variable enrollment over a long period. So,
excellent. We do understand, and we'll definitely bring it up with the committee and with the OPEB Trust.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else from the committee have any questions? We're almost perfectly on schedule, so this is good. Okay, I don't see any hands up, so I'll say thank you very much, John and Dolly. You do, as usual, you do an excellent job. We really appreciate you coming out and giving us this budget detail. And of course, there's lots of stuff you don't go over, including the detailed budget book, which we didn't get in person this year. But the having the budget line by line to look at definitely helps us better evaluate your budget request. And we thank you and keep up the good work and stay safe. So,
thank you very much. I also like to say thank you to Barry Sims for joining us. I didn't see him on there when we had this.
He jumped in the middle.
So, thank you all very much for the opportunity, and feel free to follow up with any questions you may have.
Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks. Have a good night. And as I said, you guys don't have to stick around because I know our meetings are not exactly must-see TV. So, okay. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the agenda, and just to update the committee, as I said, we won't be doing the stipend committee tonight, so we will do the updates from the town administrator next. So I see Travis is visible, so take it away, Travis.
All right, couple things. The LRP program through the state, we had a kickoff meeting with that group, and the community group that we're going on. That essentially, and I think I mentioned this before, but I'll just mention again, I would anticipate nothing on the May warrant related to that program. They're going to be in data collection mode for the first couple months. There's going to be some outreach to the business community for feedback on COVID impacts and those types of things. And the consultant, which is Nelson Nygaard, is going to be additionally collecting data as it relates to sort of, how the businesses are set up in the village commercial area, which constitutes downtown and the Blair Square area. So at the same point, I think one of the opportunities there is that I'll continue to update the FinCom, anything that comes out of that. But one of the opportunities there is going to be to kind of look at that area, look at anything that we can do, and then they will, provide us with some suggestions that will hopefully time with future grant opportunities related to the Mass Downtown Initiative from the state. So that group has got kicked off, but I would say for the first essentially month and a half, we're in data collection mode with the help of Nelson Nygaard. Additionally, I sent everything, and we had a brief discussion last week on ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. At this point, the information that we have is that I was a little concerned that, the way that the MMA had broken out how they see those funds going, had a allocation directly to towns, and then there was a county portion. Still nothing sort of official or in writing, but it sounds like the county portion for those that are not in a county will actually be going to the towns. That's a sizable sum of money. At the same point, again, we need actual guidance. I will remind everybody that as it relates to the CARES Act, over the course of a year, and Chief Cassidy will be nodding if he doesn't activate his camera, DLS changed their guidance on CARES 10 times over the last year. So there's a lot more to come on ARPA, but it is sizable, and we are waiting. So the information I last provided to the Finance Committee, the Select Board, the School Committee, which is the MMA's estimate of what every town is going to see, and the general guidelines of what we know is going to come out here, which is they want it to be for economic development, they want it to be for infrastructure, all those types of things. That's really the only guidance we have right now. We're looking for how it's going to look. But the one thing I would say is the dates that they put around it in terms of a parameter is through calendar year 24. So I would say, to do something of that nature, I can't see how they would do that as general fund revenue. Now, if they treat it as a grant or those types of things, that's still what we're looking for. And obviously, I'll follow up with this group and everybody in town, quite frankly, once I have more. But the last information that I sent you is still sort of the most up-to-date actual guidance that we have.
And can I ask a quick question on that, Travis?
Sure.
Just to clarify, and I don't know if you misspoke or whether I'm just missing something. You said if you're not part of a county, but to my knowledge, every town in Massachusetts is part of a county. So what does that mean?
I would say some Western Massachusetts communities provide municipal services through a county form of government that is more typically seen outside of Massachusetts. Everybody sort of, the majority of towns in Massachusetts do not provide services through a county. They provide them as an island unto themselves.
You were talking about service provision, okay? Because you said not part of a county, and I was like, wait a minute, everybody's part of a county. So it was a little
absolutely, and I think right. If you're in the state of Virginia, all the school services that we just had a conversation with Keith, you'd be having a conversation with the county that provides the school services, and in Massachusetts, that's not the case.
And I could just also, because I just wanted to emphasize what you said. This is 4-year money.
Yes.
I just think that's very, very important that everyone realizes this is not and let's not think that the state won't know about this money when they start looking at local aid over time either. I mean, they're going to take this money into account, and so it's just very, very important that this is not like we're just getting bundles of cash that's there to be spent immediately on them. So that's I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay, duly noted. Go ahead, Travis.
And so my other updates are sort of pertaining to the work that's been done since the Finance Committee heard from the Town Clerk's Office and Board of Health last week as it relates to position requests. I'd be happy to get into that if you'd like under this agenda item. I can do it. The clerk's request sort of hits 21 because that position's open and needs to be posted. The Board of Health is specifically under FY22. So however the chair would like me to handle that discussion, update, put it on a future agenda, I'm certainly open.
Yeah, we can put it on a future agenda. That's fine.
Okay. So I would just say, because we're sort of designing it in conjunction with the town clerk's office, working with Mary and our new HR benefits specialist on the clerk specifically. What we've really looked at is if that position were to be more robust than it is, how does that impact administrative support for the town. It would probably be outside just the purview of the clerk's office. Does it make sense to have quote unquote a floater type position? That's where that conversation's gone. The Board of Health is a little bit earlier in the stages. I have, had direct conversations with the Board of Health chair and work with that group. But those are a little bit longer of a term question, but also impacts 22, whereas the clerk's question, it impacts the posting, relatively soon. So that's generally the idea that we've sort of coalesced around, which is, there are administrative needs in town. Does it make sense to just increase that position to impact the clerk, or does it make sense to increase that only if, the position is specifically written that it supports multiple departments and fills in needs so that we, don't run into what we've all sort of seen, which is consistent requesting of, part-time hours here or increasing part-time hours over there, that this may be able to, sort of organizationally make more sense for multiple departments than just one. And that's sort of where that conversation's gone. So I'd be happy to talk about that or discuss it next week. But we are coming to a point where that one specifically, if we could post it so that we could have a position, we could have somebody, and begin to interview so that we had somebody come in and get their feet wet on the local election. Obviously, the more elections somebody who has a primary focus on the clerk's office gets under their belt, the better they are as serving the community moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that, we could possibly do that next week if you're ready. I know you and I talked offline about it, and there's some material you want to prepare. So I think if that's the case, if you're ready for next week, I can update the agenda accordingly.
Yeah. So what you and I discussed, and I have a draft here, and I'll run it by Mary and them, is how it would look on an org chart kind of thing. I think that would be great. I will finalize that conversation and be ready to bring something to the committee next week, and also the board probably on Monday. Although, as my last TA update here would be for anybody interested in the 555 Hopping Brook discussion, which is obviously primarily focused at the moment on the planning board, who is the special permit granting authority in the town of Holliston, and going through 555 special permit requests. Additionally, CRG will be in front of the select board in their capacity as highway surveyors and other items as related to traffic, and giving a presentation to the select board on March 29th. And the board has requested that a significant portion of time be carved out to allow for public comment. Obviously one of the main components that the planning board needs to focus on is the technical engineering and then our peer review of that technical engineering data, which has not left a lot of time for public comment. So one of the things that the select board wants to make sure is that, through them being able to ask questions about their purview, which is traffic, that they also allow some public comment that hasn't had time to get out there yet. So that will be on Monday. That will be a very long meeting, I anticipate. But if anybody's interested here, you could certainly send me those questions ahead of time. If you are interested in that project as well, I'll say this on the select board, so I'll say it here as well for your viewers. You can sign up that anytime we add information to the 555 website, that you get an email notifying you. So if we update dates of what it's going to be on a future agenda, we update any information provided by CRG, which is the group that has the proposal, that you get notified. So that's a service that Chris Mayo rolled up and has been very well received in town. And that's all I have for TA update.
Okay, Mr. Alford, you got a question?
It's very exciting, Travis. What I need is more emails to receive. But just a quick question, because I did see, the warrant obviously closes for submissions on Monday at 4:00. So will the board be taking a position on the recommendations from the governance committee on Monday, or will it just be that the governance committee has to submit its?
It needs to be submitted, right? So essentially, after the warrant closes on March 29th, changes can be made. Substantive changes would require an opening of the warrant, which would take a vote. It's not unprecedented and certainly happens. Non-substantive changes, changing commas and those types of things, certainly can happen after the fact. But I need the language by the 29th at 4 p.m. So thank you for that plug as well. And as was a conversation with the Finance Committee previously, that is now a fillable citizens petition form that is online for anybody outside of that particular governance committee conversation. So on Monday night's agenda, we'll actually meet a little bit early to take care of all the business before we get into the long discussion on 555 Hopping Brook. So we'll meet at 6:30 as opposed to 7 to get through the business. But at that point, the warrant will have closed. They'll sort of review, which I've done the last 2 meetings of all of the items that I have so far. One did come in today from a resident named Dan Alfred, and that will be added to the list that the select board did not see Monday night. They'll see next Monday. I have a couple other as well that came through the citizens petition forums that will finalize whether those will be, for example, the comprehensive long range plan committee was one that was brought forward by Mary Greendale, but maybe a select board sponsored article. And so all of that will be finalized Monday night. And then at that point, we can certainly dive into any of the articles and the merits of them and those types of things. And I'll be providing for your future meetings sort of any of the backup for the financial components. Monday, we are still accepting anything from citizens, from departments through Monday at 4 p.m.
Okay, just a point of clarification. So the bylaw changes that are being proposed will actually be sponsored by the governance committee, not by the select board.
I'll have to check who is an eligible sponsor. If they're not an eligible sponsor, they may need to be sponsored by the select board. But all of those types of details will get run through town council once I receive those details. So anything that comes in to my office, which at the moment I have not received a final sort of warrant article in that form from the governance committee. I believe that they have multiple meetings this week. So I would anticipate once I get that I'll run it by council and sort of shore up any of those details, as I do with anything that comes into the office as a request to go on the warrant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so that's it for the TA update. And liaison updates, well, go ahead, Michelle.
I was wondering when we're going to be discussing sustainability. I didn't see it on the agenda.
Yeah, that's why I was going to bring that up too, because you had mentioned that earlier. So are we going to plan to get Matt in here to talk about, I mean, I know budget wise, the request is 50,000, right? You've told us that already. I guess that we would just like to meet with him. We had a discussion with him last year about, the history there is that there's supposed to be grant funding that they're supposed to be seeking and things like that. So I think it would be nice to get an update from him on the grant component of what he's been working on, those kinds of things.
Yeah, he has a sort of report generated that shows everything, and then the items that we're working on now. I actually have a narrative for it, and I think it came to fruition or it came to discussion last week that he just didn't make it on the agenda for whatever reason. So if you'd like to put it on for next week, I can coordinate with him to be there. I know Michelle's reached out to him as liaison.
Yeah, I have all of his information too. If he can't be, I've written down what he would say. I mean, it's better hearing it from him, obviously, in case anyone has questions.
Right. Yeah, and actually, I'll just point out, one of the items a couple of the items that we'll have in terms of articles. One of them for the EV charging station revolving fund. He'll be involved in some of those conversations as well. But as it pertains to specifically his budget, I think the conversation that that was had when the position was created was, we want to see the dollars that are being brought in through grants to his position, those types of things. I think is, if you could put that on the agenda next week, I'll try to coordinate with him. And if he can't make it, Michelle or I can sort of deliver his narrative.
Okay, that works for me. And I also, I'm telling this for everybody to remind me if I forget when he comes in, we want to talk about streetlights. Remember, we had the streetlight discussion about how we deal with that counter the disincentive to be energy efficient. So
is the select board ever going to write a letter to our two elected officials to the State House? That's what I suggested. It has to come from above.
No, I can, one of the things we can do and wrap up that conversation with him is that is probably the path I think that we discussed in the streetlight conversation that Vin just brought up. And certainly, a number of items that we've done in terms of letters that have come from the select board or myself to other groups that we've been working with, we can talk with him about that and next steps.
Yeah. So when you think about it, that's actually one of those weird green community types of things that actually have a huge impact, right? You're talking about streetlights that are using huge amounts of electricity. So anyway,
Over plastic bags getting eliminated versus paper,
yes.
But that's me.
So, yes, and for those of you who may or may not have been paying attention, when I mentioned about the whole scam that is plastic recycling, there was another report on the media on NPR did another in-depth analysis of that a week or two ago. So I'd encourage anybody to look that up and discover how little of our plastic is actually being recycled, even though it's got the little triangle on it.
It was really fascinating. I listened to it. I was.
Well, I told you the bottom line was the plastics industry duped everybody into thinking that triangle meant something when it doesn't. Mm-hmm. So okay, so that's it for that. Okay, any other liaison updates? I will postpone any discussion of the schools because we're going to have our session with them later. So, okay. Okay, anything, we need the pandemic update from the chief. There you go.
Good evening, Chief Cassidy. Since last week, we've had approximately $32,000 in CARES expenses that have posted to Munis. The majority of that was round 3 of the rent mortgage relief being administered through Youth and Family Services and the Holliston Community Action Fund. We continue to monitor and project for not only expenses in FY21, but there's also been some long-range planning looking towards expenses through the end of the calendar year, and our PPE supply continues to be strong.
Okay, good. And just for you and or Travis, it might be good. I don't know, maybe I missed it because it's been so hectic lately, but if we haven't sent out an update on the CARES spending to date, it might be worth seeing where we are now. I don't know if anything's changed since the last time you sent us to it. I don't recall, but I think the last time we got a report was a month ago or something like that. So if there's been stuff since then, it might be nice to just get an updated tracking sheet. So.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. I do post a 10,000 foot view on our weekly update that I post on the website on Thursday evenings that not only gives the metrics with regards to the caseloads and the positivity rate and where the cases are located, but as of a few weeks ago, I'm also including the breakdown of the spending.
Okay, good. And with regards to that, I know this is not quite financial, but just for public interest, obviously the governor came out last week and said 55 plus April 5th and everybody April 19th for vaccinations. I know that we are not.
Yeah, they'll be eligible to make appointments at that time, but
correct.
There will still be a substantial wait before they're able to get through all of the eligible individuals.
Right, and well, that was going to be my follow-on. Was I've also been reading in correlation with that there's been a dramatic ramp up in vaccine supply. So that's what I was going to say. Is the I know you're on the calls, and again, this is you're not in charge of this because the town's not doing these vaccinations, but given that you're tied into the whole thing, is part of that based on an expectation that we're going to see a dramatic increase in supply in the next few weeks that hopefully make it so that people will be able to get appointments?
Yeah, they're anticipating possibly a 15% increase in supply chain availability in coming weeks. And then additionally on top of that, although we are not currently conducting any vaccination program in town, we are part of an 8-town regional collaborative that was recently approved for our plan by the Department of Public Health. However, several paragraphs into the approval letter, it was clear that just because we approved your plan doesn't mean that there's any vaccine for us to send you. So we're not scheduling appointments yet, but there is a possibility that in the coming months, we may have a vaccine site available as part of a regional collaborative. We've got another planning meeting about that tomorrow.
Okay. Hey, Stu, you had a question about that?
Well, I do. It's not financial related, but Chief, there are many individuals that are getting appointments that don't fall into the sort of current categories of what should be getting vaccines. And that goes for like different towns are scheduling appointments, and I've heard CVS is doing it. And so I'm hearing lots of people that are getting vaccinated without being in the category that's listed. So we're in the mindset of we should wait until we are in the category, but should we also, I guess, be trying to get these appointments that seem to be popping up all over the place because other people are getting vaccinated and not in the category? Or are they really trying to just keep it to the categories that are there?
So if an individual were to obtain an appointment without meeting one of the criteria, that would mean that most likely they are not being truthful on the self-attestation form. So I've seen the registration sites for mass vac sites, as well as the major pharmacies in the area, and you have to check off which eligible category you are in. So if they continued with the application process, they were signing under pains and penalties of perjury that they were part of one of those groups. And if you're saying that they were ineligible to get an appointment, then they falsified their application to the pharmacy.
Even with the instances where they may have people didn't show up for their appointment or canceled at the last minute and they have excess vaccines where they need to get rid of them?
So excess vaccines is another kind of gray area, which really only applies to the Moderna and the Pfizer, because the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has a much longer shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
The guidance from DPH was a little bit looser on how they can administer those quote unquote extra doses that they didn't want to see wasted. And the way they have their waiting list for those extra dose availability is at their discretion. So yeah, certainly someone who got an appointment that way may not meet one of the eligible criteria. But yes, we are still urging people sign up for the waiting list through the state. When you are eligible, you will be contacted. They send out updates on a weekly basis of people who are now eligible to be able to make appointments. And a lot of the pharmacies post their new appointments at specific times. I know CVS tends to drop their new appointment availability at midnight. And so people who want to take a nap in the evening and then get up at midnight have been finding a lot of success being able to schedule an appointment between midnight and 1 a.m.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, and Dan, you had a question?
It's more of a non-financial PSA, given that we got the schools here. But cases are increasing again in Massachusetts. I just saw that the number today puts us on a rolling 7-day average of almost 1,900 cases, which is back to basically mid-February levels after sort of. And this is not the way the state sort of reports it, where they actually put it on the days, but just as they report it. So I just everyone this is not the time to let up. Keep wearing your mask.
Right.
This is, I know that everyone's really tired. Weather's starting to get nice. Let's go meet up with 20 of our closest friends and hang out. But
I completely agree. Not only are we watching the numbers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but last night before the board, I also did share sort of look at some of the European countries, which historically have been a predictor of what happens in America. And there are a lot of countries who are seeing a rise, a sort of a third wave taking place in Europe right now. And when you look at our numbers in a couple other states, you do see the tick starting to go up. So yeah, definitely an area of concern, and I agree. Let's not become lax in our mitigation steps. And even if people have been fully vaccinated, the guidance still is that in most settings they need to continue to wear face coverings, minimize their group size, and keep their distance.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. Okay, next up, we want to talk about the Capital Subcommittee, and I'll let Mr. Maxwell basically talk about that as the chair. The subcommittee, good.
So Sue is looking at, Sue, do you want to kind of explain the situation?
That's fine. So I actually, my work has increased dramatically. And along with that, I actually have a consulting class that I'm taking for my MBA program this spring that has it's just a lot more work. My group is meeting multiple times per week for the class because we're doing a whole consulting project. So it's like another added job on top of my job. And so I'm running short on time, and so I just need someone to replace me on the capital subcommittee.
So, Sue, congratulations on the fun opportunity, and you will be sadly missed. So,
Okay, so the question is, who wants to replace Sue on the capital subcommittee?
I want to nominate Mark. Or Vin, if you want to.
Between writing the minutes?
What would you say, Michelle?
I said he can
Well,
write.
we've been distributing the minutes burden, but now that we have Travis, we'll make him, no, just kidding. He's going to have all this administrative support now, so he can have somebody do the minutes, right? So if we give Liz, if we recommend, give Liz to go ahead to post this position, then we can put in there that person has to take minutes for the subcommittee.
That is very much part of the conversation that we will have.
Yes. So
I'll do it. This is Vin Murphy. He's
okay. So if that's the case, I will.
Sorry, Vin.
Well, if Mark doesn't want to do it, I'll do it. So
to be frank with you, it's not that I don't want to do it. I just don't know how much time I have in the next. If this was May, no problem. But unfortunately, the next I don't know, 6 weeks up until May is difficult for me.
You mean you don't have the time to spend all day working on finance committee stuff like I did today? So
no, I don't.
Okay, so if that's the case, I'll entertain a motion that to nominate Vin to fill Sue's to replace Sue on the capital subcommittee.
I believe it's a point.
Well, it doesn't matter because we're not.
I make a motion that we appoint Vin to replace Sue on the capital subcommittee of the finance.
Okay, if you want it that way, that's fine. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? And Vin, did you want to say something, or your hand up for a reason, or you just left it up?
I was going to say I was going to volunteer. No, that was it.
Okay. Then any further discussion on that motion? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. Maxwell?
yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So congratulations, Vin. You're now part of the team. So
Thanks,
okay.
Vin.
Anything else that you want to discuss capital subcommittee related, Mr. Maxwell?
Just very briefly, Vin, if you can hang out afterwards so that we can collectively find a time.
That's fine. Yep,
we need
that's
to
fine.
very quickly meet and reorganize.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Well, hold it. We meet and reorganize like you, me, and Vin. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, we have to post for that.
Yeah, but I want us to pick a date.
Oh, okay.
Time
You
when
just
we
want to do
can do
scheduling. Okay, I thought you wanted to do it after the meeting. I was like, we can't do it today. So, okay. Okay, duly noted. We'll just remind me at the end of the meeting. Okay. Any FY22 budget issues, budget matters? We talked about the sustainability coordinator coming in. From my perspective, we'll start having the real discussions as soon as we get by the school's presentation next week. And then, we're going to have a few meetings, as you know, I already posted for April, and that's when we're going to go in earnest. Mr. Travis, one question for you is, when do we expect to see a warrant for us to start discussing?
You're talking about, so obviously the list is being culled at the moment. You're talking about an actual document.
Yeah, something. I mean, I'm not obviously not in the next. I'm expecting this in early April, right? Because the warrant doesn't close till the 29th. But I'm saying, do you expect that by whatever it is, April, whatever our first meeting is, I guess April 6th or something? Yeah, April 6th. Do you think we'll have a first draft to look at of the warrant, of what we expect to be on the warrant?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll start in earnest on all the budget prep and the warrant review and so forth in April. So,
Are we going to want to meet with the people who are sponsoring warrant? Well,
well, to the extent that there are financial implications, yes. And I guess that's that's for Travis, right? When petitioners come in with articles that have financial implications, I would respectfully request that you point them to us and say, if there's a financial implication, you should schedule time on that, get on the finance committee agenda to have them review and make a recommendation on the financial component.
I will absolutely do that, but I will also provide you a list. And so for something like a scenic route, I will assume that it has no financial component, but if
Correct.
you feel differently, you'll let me know.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying we've had in the past, we've had situations where there were obvious financial things. People wanted to spend money on certain things and they were not directed to us. And so they were kind of surprised when we kind of said, hey, you should come talk to us because we're supposed to make a recommendation on anything financial. So,
Yep.
so I'm just saying that, we had, I would assume that obviously you know this already, but just to reiterate that if a petition article comes through that has a financial component, you do us a favor and advise them that they should get on our agenda.
And Travis, I would say that a scenic road may actually have financial implications depending on how many signs you plan on putting up along it.
Okay, let's not go there.
Tina's left. What are we going to do?
There are some signs that go with a scenic route, but the one thing on that one was
$25,000 signs.
Some of those to make it binding, and the feedback that was provided to the individual who's looking at the scenic road, that to make it binding, it needs to be sponsored by the planning board, the Concom, or the historical commission. So a couple of those types of steps. Road acceptances, Dr. Chair, where do you stand on road acceptances in terms of financial impact?
Well, generally, we don't worry about those too much, partly because the financial impact is just the plowing, and that's usually a minimal delta, if anything. The bigger issue is we do discuss them to make sure that there is no other financial impact. Like we've had issues before where there have been petition articles to accept roads and that posed other problems, and or road acceptances that had come before the select board multiple times and were rejected by them for other reasons and things. So those types of things. But the typical, hey, there's a new road and the town's done all its due diligence and the road's fine and we're just going to plow another street. It's usually nothing more than saying, okay, we're fine with that. I mean, that's,
I'm sure you've heard this, Travis, but there have been developers in town who have put less than stellar roads in their developments, and the town has ended up with a pretty significant bill at some point to fix that. So not that there's necessarily a financial impact right away, but if you're saying, what, we should do this, and you've checked all the boxes and made sure that everything T's and I's are crossed. I mean,
Right, and that's why I said, like, if it's something that meets the town's criteria, et cetera, it's usually not a big deal. It's usually when there's some extenuating circumstance that may result in some future expense or the town taking on liability that we probably don't want to take on. But
Gotcha.
Hopefully it never gets to that. So. Okay, any other FY22 budget matters? Okay, if not, then we are at the end of our open session agenda. So I will say that, well, first of all, I'll just give everybody the opportunity because we won't return. If anybody has any other, of the committee has any comment they want to make before we move into executive session, raise your hand. Okay, so I see none. So then I will entertain a motion to enter executive session with the school committee to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining.
From which we will not return. So
from which we will not return to open session, yes.
Are any others, should we be waiting for other school committee members to join us? Or is this it?
I don't know, but that's fine if it is just them because we don't have a quorum of the school committee, but we have a quorum of the budget subcommittee, which is really what's posted. So,
I to allow them to go eat their dinners with their families while you started your meeting. That's what they did, and I just texted them. So they should be here momentarily, but I think you can move into executive session.
Yes. Okay. So executive, you heard my motion. Do I have somebody want to make that
so
motion?
Moved.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
What were you going to say, Dan?
I made the motion.
Okay. Well, good. Well, however we want to record it in minutes. Okay. So that obviously requires a roll call vote, as all our votes are. So Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Emer?
You have to say why we're going into executive session?
I did. I said for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining.
Oh, okay, you don't have to read more. Okay, yes.
Well, I looked up the 10 reasons, and you can say collective bargaining where discussion of content in open session would be detrimental to the bargaining position of the town or something like that. But basically, it's like reason number 6 or 10 or something like that. So, so you're yes?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Sussian?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, so for those members of the public, that concludes the public portion of our meeting tonight. Thank you for joining us. As you heard, we'll be hearing from the school department next Tuesday, March 30th. But for tonight, the open public portion of our meeting is concluded. So thank you and good night.